What's up everyone, OJ here, welcome back to another video, and before we get started, please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click the notification bell because we have a heavyweight showdown that is going on right now, and sorry for any background noise or bad audio, still using my different setup here, but let's go ahead and get right into this, man. This is like Link versus Ganon, or this is like Mario versus Bowser, or like Tyson versus Holyfield, or like Goku versus Vegeta. This is Nintendo versus Bloomberg. Here we go again. Insert the CJ meme. I had to just discuss this. I wasn't planning on doing a video. I was planning on just relaxing for a bit, but we can't. This is the eternal struggle. This is like, like Dracula versus the vampire killers, Castlevania, the Bloodline, Nintendo versus Bloomberg. Here we go again. We have a new report of once again a 4K Nintendo Switch, and Nintendo has come out and said not so fast. So we're gonna go ahead and get into the article first from Takahashi Mochizuki from Bloomberg, and then we'll get into what Nintendo had to say again, because if you're thinking deja vu, yeah, this is the same thing that happened earlier in the year. Then we'll try to get some truth out of this. We'll talk about the truth when it comes down to this. So first off, Takahashi Mochizuki from Bloomberg had this to say: exclusive, Bloomberg learned at least 11 game developers ranging from large publishers to small studios, and include at least one that has never made a console game before, Zynga Inc., were in possession of a Nintendo's 4K development kit for the Switch. So that was that. You guys can check out the article if you want to go read it there. We're not going to go over everything, but that's the gist of it that they put out in the tweet with the article link. And then Nintendo, not even like that much longer later, like they didn't even wait. They spent like no time. They like woke up. It was like the Undertaker meme, like out of the coffin. They weren't dead, but they're just waking up to say, no, this is not correct. So here's what Nintendo had to say, stating that a news report on September 30th, 2021 JST falsely claims that Nintendo is supplying tools to drive game development for the Nintendo Switch with 4K support. To ensure correct understanding among our investors and customers, we want to clarify that this report is not true. We also want to reinstate that, as we announced in July, we have no plans for any new model other than the Nintendo Switch OLED model, which will launch on October 8, 2021. So there you go there. So what is going on here? Is there somebody lying? What is happening with this heavyweight battle between these two giants in their own fields? So we're going to try to break down on what's kind of like going on here. So here is what I think is going on. This is what I think is going on. I think at one point Nintendo did want to maybe potentially have a 4K Nintendo Switch, an extension, an expansion pack, an N64 DD, something like a Nintendo Switch Pro, or like a PlayStation Pro, or like an Xbox One X. I think at some point Nintendo wanted to do that, but I think that they saw what was going down with the system, they saw what was going down with the manufacturing and component parts, they kind of saw what was happening and decided to pull the plug on that, instead doing the Nintendo Switch OLED, which they can secure the chips with Tegra X1. They already had a stockpile of those. It's easier to do, whatever the case is. So I think that they pulled the plug on that, and any information that came out about any type of Nintendo Switch 4K or whatever was old information. Now, what I do think that this is following up on potentially what some developers are working on for a next generation Switch, the next Switch, because people have talked about this in terms of what is Nintendo doing for next generation. Now, there is some confusion based on what Nintendo has stated what they're going to do for next generation. Now, last year, Nintendo did state that they're about halfway point of the Nintendo Switch's life. Now, I am counting in my head. Now, correct me if I'm wrong in the chat here, guys, or in the comment section. Now, I'm counting. So the Switch launched in 2017. They said halfway point in 2020. That would mean, if you're just going off of calendar years, that would mean 3 calendar years, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, right? So to that point. So that would mean 3 more years from 2020, and that would complete the cycle if you're going off of what Nintendo said. that would mean that 2023 would be when we see the next generation Switch, or we see what they're doing next. And that's what I have accurately, or not accurately, but that's what I am predicting at this point, that Nintendo will just forego a Switch 4K. They don't need to do it because we're already in 2022 at this point. I mean, it's already 2022 at this point. This year is flying by. It's pretty much October, right? We're October. So there's only a couple more months left here at the end of the year. Then we're 2022, and then 2023 is here. And there's no way that they're going to release like a more expensive 4K Switch, right? Right before they do another system. I mean, they could. I mean, heck, you never know what's going to happen. Nintendo can be unpredictable. But I think at this point, they're probably just saying, you know what, Switch is doing pretty good. We can probably sell another, 30, 40 million more Switches in the next couple years. So let's just do that. Let's get over 100 something million with this. It will be the best selling home console Nintendo's ever done, or at least anything that's been considered a home console, or the new hybrid, whatever the heck you want to call it at this point, and just say, hey, you know what, like, we got that. Now let's move on to the next thing, backwards compatibility, continue building on Nintendo Switch Online, carry over all your stuff. Like, that would be a good transition. Let's get a good transition to next generation. And I think that's what you're seeing here with some of these reports. It's pretty much the basis or the foundation of what Nintendo's going to do for the next Switch. So I don't think anybody's lying here. I think some developers do have something for the next generation as a building block, and maybe they get an updated dev kit. And I think that Nintendo's stating, well, hey, there's nothing for the Nintendo Switch, the standard Nintendo Switch, what they have on the market. Now, next generation, that's a whole different thing. That's what this could be the basis of, or the start of. So I think that's what's going on here. It's not like one is lying more so than the other. It's that Nintendo is playing coy with what they're doing for the next generation, and these developers maybe potentially got information for a potential extension like a Pro, but Nintendo pulled the plug on that, and now they're going to turn that into the next generation Switch, or what they're doing next. So I think it's that. I mean, why else would these reports keep coming? Nintendo has to keep talking about it because they're not necessarily wrong, right? I guess if it's for the next generation Switch, but these developers have something for a 4K enabled Nintendo Switch, or something that will be the next generation Switch. So I think that is the truth. When it comes down to it, that is the truth, because it seems like there's just so much gray area, or so much like, what's going on here? Why would 11 developers say this? Is this all fake? I don't think so. I think that there's some truth to that, but at the same time, I don't think it's a Nintendo Switch, because if it's midway point, I mean, I guess you can pull like an Xbox One X, right? Which I think that launched a few years beforehand, but now we're getting way too close, right? We're getting way too close. What would the price be of this? They just have the Nintendo Switch OLED. I mean, to me, it doesn't really make sense, but Nintendo's been known sometimes to do some crazy things, but it doesn't make sense to release another extension of the Nintendo Switch, a 4K one, then have your next generation system, unless you're planning to extend it past what you already stated, which I don't think Nintendo will. I really don't think that Nintendo will do that, because there's just no point, especially with the chip shortage. Like, how are you going to be able to supply enough of these new next generation Switches, whenever you're going to do this? Like, how are you going to be able to do that? There's just not enough of them. Microsoft and Sony are struggling heavily to meet the demand of the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series. So now is not the time, at least at this point, to be gearing up, or to be getting ready for some type of revision that's just going to be hard to get in the first place, when you have a surplus or a stockpile of the chips that are already available and ready for this current Nintendo Switch. And people are buying it. I know some developers are frustrated, and some fans are frustrated with the performance, or whatever the case is, and trying to get games to run on there and everything. But at this point, the Switch hasn't really been getting everything from all these third-party developers, and the ones that are bringing stuff over are using the specialized port teams to get it done, and people seem to be happy with that. Nintendo's still going with their games. Games are still being sold. People are still enjoying games, being able to play anywhere that they want. So when it's ready, it will be ready. There's no need to rush it and make a bad decision and screw over the next gen, or make the transition rough, because you need to rush out something for enthusiasts and people to get excited about. It's fine. The Switch is doing fine. There's no need to make a crucial mistake here, in my opinion. There's no need to do that. I think Nintendo should make the smart approach, and I think that they're going to do that. Obviously, they're going to wait, make sure that they can supply enough, make sure this chip shortage is good, and make sure that they launch the next generation with a smooth transition, and make sure everything is on point. You cross your T's, dot your I's with the next generation, so you don't have that Wii U situation. You don't have the situation where you have a rough transition with software, or with games, or whatever the case is. Make sure it's a lot smoother this time. I mean, Nintendo, for the past couple generations, they've had some rough transitions, right? The Nintendo 3DS, that was rough starting out. The Nintendo Wii U, that was rough starting out. There was some problems at first. There definitely was. Now, the Switch, they nailed that one because they gave up on the Wii U really early, right? They gave up on that and just started putting everything towards the Switch. So I think that this time they're going to make sure that they just transition it and ease it in, since they're probably not going to completely destroy the idea of what the Switch was and the operating system and the gimmick of the system. They're going to continue going with that and then probably evolve it like they kind of did like with the GameCube. They took the base of the GameCube and then just added on top of it with the Wii. And that was a smoother transition for Nintendo when it comes to certain things. They had games all the way up until when the Wii came out and even some cross-gen stuff. So I think they're going to do something similar to that to ease right into it, and it'll be better for gamers and it'll be better for consumers out there. So we'll see what happens with this, man, but this is just an interesting situation. And like I said, it's like a heavyweight boxing match between these two going back and forth, you know? So what do you guys think about this? What are your thoughts on what Nintendo's doing? What are your thoughts on the Bloomberg article? How do you feel about what I had to say? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Check out the link in the description. We've got a member page. Go to become a member, gets you access to perks, rewards, benefits, Discord. And thank you to everybody who's still signed up for that. Make sure you hit that like button if you forgot to do so. Subscribe if you're someone new, and we'll catch you for the next video. Peace.